All right, happy November, everyone. Thank you for joining us to the group that's live and also those who are watching afterwards. We decided to, like every month, we're kind of like looking at what the best topic would be based on the timing. And we really felt like with some of the questions we were getting about the data and reading and interpreting data, and there's much more data now on the student profile. So how do we use that to our best knowledge, and how do we use the information we're getting from the advisor report, and what does this mean and what does that mean? We wanted to kind of dive into that a bit. I got quite a few slides because I didn't want to just like jam a whole bunch of information, so I'll be scanning through pretty quickly. So for those that are watching live, like feel free to slow it down for the parts that you really need, potentially within the recording. And I will put some timestamps as well when we do send out the recording. So if you are watching that, hopefully you are able to kind of jump into the areas that are really pertaining to you. After we get through that data, we're going to take a look at the nonverbal thinking exercise. We do have the peers program starting again in February. The current group is going very well. Bethany Church is here, one of the instructors for that course, just to give some more information on that once we get into the nonverbal thinking side. And registration will be opening. We'll be sending out information tomorrow, actually, for that. Okay, so in terms of the agenda today, I've just kind of spoken to this. We're going to discuss how to read the data and what we're seeing, and then jump into the nonverbal thinking activity. So EASO and access to meaningful data. This is something I love about the direction that overall Aerosmith has gone in the last few years. Just the amount of data we have at our fingertips on a minute-to-minute basis and seeing how students are doing is awesome. I love having data. I think it helps out in a lot of different ways. And with all this data, there's a lot of good things we can do. We can help with problem solving. We can help with motivation, help with reassurance that things are going in the right direction. We can help with action planning to help get out of situations or understand what the data is telling us and the direction we should be going. Help with getting the gist of how things are going just on a day-to-day basis. Help with creating rewards at home if that's necessary for some of you. Help to build integrity for the program to be able to understand, okay, like what do I need to do to get to this level? What do I need to do on my own? How do I get to that point? And it just builds a bit of integrity to understand that process, and can help with refocusing, can help us get information to be able to understand if we're on track for what we're working towards, and the data can speak to that. And there's different timestamps that we have for the data. So there's data that you see daily within the student portal. And even as a parent, you can log in and see this data. We can reset passwords to ensure that everyone has access to this that needs it. We want to ensure that the daily information that you're seeing can be put to use. I know as a parent with a child in Aerosmith as well, like I'm relying on this data daily to really get an idea of how my son's doing within his progress in clocks. You also see a monthly advisor report. So that will be coming home to you guys on Monday and Tuesday for November. So this should be a little bit of a help, especially for newer families or families that start in the summer, when we take a little a break from advisor reports just because of the inconsistency of the teachers with holidays and classes and cramming the classes down into a shorter period. So for those of you who these might be new to, or those who have just kind of not really looked at them as closely, but now are seeing that like this can be beneficial to us. Just an idea of how to read through that report to get the most out of it. And also yearly. So every student that starts with us, or most students that start with us, do start with an initial learning profile. That helps to guide our direction for programming, helps us to give a little bit of a benchmark for where we're starting. And then we assess all the areas that have been worked on for part-time students at the end of the year. We like to redo the initial assessment at least every couple of years for students that are with us for longer, just to ensure that like there are some areas like our memory for information and instruction, our long-term memory really improves with symbol relations, because you're starting to notice more things in life. You're starting to see how things connect. That creates stronger memories. So sometimes there's these related gains within other areas we might not be working on. So we do want to reassess these around that 2-year mark. So let us know if you're in that situation and think that that might help to give you some more data to work with. So observing data within the executive function and cognitive exercises. We work on a lot of different exercises. About 90% of our students are on one of these 4 exercises. So symbol relations, symbolic thinking, nonverbal thinking, and predicative speech. We typically start with this online because we're working more in a triage situation than our on-site schools where students are doing 4 to 6 activities per day. You can really hit a lot of areas at once and a lot of weaknesses at once to strengthen them as a group. However, as this is more of a extracurricular program for families all around the world, we're in 21 different time zones currently. So we are working with a number of students from a number of places who are still going through their daily life as they were before working with us, most of them. They are still going to school, they're still doing their normal extracurricular and adding this in as well. So with that, we are more looking at the one activity that's the most important. In terms of executive function, typically that falls in that category. So today I'll just be looking at these 4 areas. If you're working on a different activity than this, and you're looking for data for how, or looking for an idea of how to understand that data, I will be happy to book a meeting with you and go through the same process that I'm about to for these 4. So we'll start out with clocks. So this is what teachers are seeing on a day-to-day basis. And the numbers as I'm teaching that I would be looking at right away would be this number here, which you don't really see on your side, but I'll show you how to get this. And this would be the total time per day. So as the clocks are ticking, the timer is ticking. If you finish a clock and kind of sit back and breathe for a minute, just like, okay, regain my composure. I didn't like how I did on that one, just trying to calm down before I get into the next one. The clock's not really ticking during that time. So we factor that time in. So of a 60-minute period, we have like 5 minutes of a little just connecting with the class and the teacher and understanding your goal and getting started time. And that leaves 55 minutes for the work. And of that 55 minutes, we're looking for 40 minutes of pure engagement. And we look for that number in all of these classes and every class that we work on, because that's the amount of time we saw showing significant changes within research. It's not like if my big plan was to join the gym, and if I don't go every day and don't work out the whole time, it's not going to be a benefit. Like, yes, getting in there every day is amazing, and that will create the biggest benefit. Sometimes life comes up and you just can't get to the 4 classes per week, or you can't get to the full 40 minutes per day, such as with the example of this student here. It doesn't mean you're not making good progress, and it doesn't mean that you're not working towards the goals that we've set out, and it doesn't mean it's going to take longer to move through your program. We do want to try to move up to that 40-minute mark just because of research. And that's kind of where we're going with the engagement score that you're going to be seeing on the report. And we're also looking for trends of numbers going down or getting faster, students moving in a certain direction. So this kind of helps teachers get an idea of goals and how to work through that. And this is more what we're looking on in the data that you're seeing, but I'll show you how to get that too. So there's data you see daily in the student portal. So as you log in, there's a little dashboard that gives you some information just on the general idea of what's happening, what's your goal, where you've been working towards within this graph. The little blue line is your benchmark. So, or your personal goal. So what your goal is at the start of the class that the teacher and you are working on and what we're working towards. So you'll see this one's yellow because the student didn't quite make it to their goal. Most days they are, or getting fairly close to it. And the height of the line is actually the attendance. So the days are kind of on the side here as you're going up. Aerosmith is based off of 5 days, but we do it in 4. So there's 4 lines here to get up to your mastery goal. And that's kind of how that helps out with that section. But as we're moving through, you'll want to go to this detail tab, because the detail tab is really going to break down a lot of this information. So this would give you all events. So every amount of work that you've worked on within the time and the goals that we're setting with that. So it shows many of you have started on clocks, you're familiar with it. So these are the set times here, the percentage, and kind of the amount correct within the percentage, which you could do the math on your own to get that 88%, for example. And this student is working towards getting a bit faster. The goals show up here. There wasn't work done on the 30th, so that's where it showed up that there wasn't any work done there, went right from the 26th to 31st, and that's where you have the goal, so the type of work here. So if you were to look at each set, you can kind of see like, hey, this set was good, this one reached your goal, this one was a little slower, you had 5 out of 8 that were at the pace that we're working for. That's great. Let's keep working at that. Helps with a little bit with goal setting. When you're breaking down the daily summary, and I'll scan back quickly. So if we're looking for this 36 number, if you do quick math, you can kind of make this out within the daily summary. So if you do 13 sets, so 13 times 160 divided by 60 to give you a minute, because this is based out of seconds, and then add 2 minutes for the warm-up activity that you're doing, you can get to that number to figure out like, hey, are we at the 40 minutes? Do we need to do a couple more sets? So that's what we're really looking towards. So if you want to find out that bigger number, and that is important, I do wish that we had that number on here, and it's a request that I've made to Aerosmith to get that added. But that's how you find out that number. So if you're looking at the total day, you multiply the number of sets by the average time and then divide by 60 to get the minutes worked. There's going to be a mastery graph there that shows the trend towards mastery. The blue line at the top would be the mastery time we're working towards. And we want to see a nice curve on the way up. There's going to be small plateaus like there is with anything, and they'll come up, and sometimes that'll dip and come back up. Sometimes the focus changes, like we're focusing on percent this week because the percent dipped because we were focusing on speed last week and we were going a bit too fast and the percentage dropped. So sometimes you'll see these change. And if that prompts a question, that's a good time to be asking the teacher a question about that. We're seeing the line flatten a bit. Is that normal? What's been working on? What have you guys been working on to be able to move? Like, these are times when asking questions backed by data will really help you get on the same page as the teacher. So data you see monthly for clocks on the advisor report. So we do put these graphs in that we would see on our side as the teachers. To read these, we're really looking at the level progress would be the levels that the student is working on. So 3-hand reading, 3-hand drawing, 3-hand missing hand, 3-hand equal length, and 3-hand time were the 5 levels of the students. Every time there's 5 levels, it doesn't change, it won't add more, it'll only show you those 5. The idea on this side would be the student has worked 2 sessions out of the expected 6 it would take to master the level, right? So they mastered it in 2. This is exceeding expectations within this level because they are moving up ahead of the benchmark time. In terms of the daily engagement, this is showing that same information I was just showing, but it's showing those green bars working up towards your goal. So the personal goal, that would be the goal that the student and or the teacher are assigning at the start of the block, would be this blue line. So we're reaching these goals. The levels changed at certain times, so the bars will change their shape based on the levels changing. And then the mastery goal would be the line at the top. And you can see the student reached mastery, so they ended up moving down to a new level. And that changes the shape of the graph because it takes some time to get used to it. And now they're moving back up to another mastery. All right. When we're looking over at the progress rating, because this student is reaching their goals regularly on their current level, even though these might have been exceeding expectations a bit, they are still meeting expectations based on the level that they're on, because they are reaching their goal and they're putting that work in every day. And then the timing at which we're seeing within the initial graph, so that 36 minutes to 40 minutes, around that 36 minutes, we're looking around a 3 of an engagement score, right? We're not quite up at the amount we need to really push for that. 3 is great. And this is out of 4. And this is kind of a guide to how you read this. We do have some extra dates and everything in here. And then the teachers will put comments based on what the students are doing, how they've been getting to this, and try to make sense of it as best they can. At the end of your report, you will see that there's a link to meet with your advisor. You can choose to do this or not. We'd love to meet to chat about this. We will often invite the teacher in for these meetings, and they're quick just to ensure that everyone's on the same page and we move forward. So the data you see for clocks in the ILP and YPR, so the bigger assessments. So you could see something like this, where a student might start on simple relations at a moderate severe level. And then over the course of the year, once they finish up, for this student, this was great progress. They moved to above average, which is considered good progress. There can be good, slow, or NA. Slow would mean there's progress, it's just you don't see the rating change. And NA would mean either there wasn't enough time worked on it, or we did not see good movement. And in those situations, we do meet to reevaluate as to why, but those things should have been caught within the months ahead based on the amount of data we've had. So really look to those advisor reports to see that process. Symbolic thinking, so L-think, is typically one of the second activities we will work on. Normally we do start with clocks. Symbolic thinking, nonverbal thinking, or predicative often come next. So we'll dive into L-think next. So this is the left prefrontal cortex. So this is what teachers see. So we see a little bit different, and this is the same data that you would actually see on your end. So the student had on, let's say, the 31st of October, 1 mastery out of 5 attempts given, and it averaged about 8 minutes and 28 seconds between attempts. Right? If I'm looking down and saying like, hey, they did 8 minutes in the last couple of days, but these days they were doing attempts within just 5 minutes apart, that doesn't actually mean that the student is working slower or doing less. We often coach to slow down. We need thinking to take place within this process, and we will be sending home a little bit more of a guide for both L-think and R-think to what students should be doing while they are going through that process. Because if it's very difficult to be able to maintain that focus on that story, there's some help that we want to be able to give caregivers should they be looking in and seeing the student kind of stumped. We don't want to be walking students towards the right answer, because then you're actually doing the work for the prefrontal cortex and it's not developing. So we want to give some guidance there. But in this case, I would guess the teacher would have been, especially after 3 days of working at around a 5-minute pace, slow down the process a bit so we can start to get some more masteries, and we started to see some more here. But the benchmark goal is just 1 mastery per day. So 1 out of 5 is awesome. 2 out of 5 is doubling the expectation, right? So this, I would say the student is doing quite well. So the data you see in the student portal, when you log in the dashboard right here, we're seeing all green lines. This would be that same student. So everything is working as it should right now. Today they had 1 out of 5. Then the goal would be 4 10s a week, 4 mastered stories a week. When we're comparing this to school, that seems slower, but we really do want to slow down with processing to help to access this part of the brain. We're not trying to get a 10 on every attempt, because that means it's working automatically. That's kind of the end goal. But this would be what you would see when you log in. And historically, this is what all the information that was there. But since they added the detail tab, now you can see each attempt coming through, how long it took to get that attempt over, and the score, and then the duration of time between the attempts. And then daily, so you're seeing every attempt, and this is, as I just said, this would be the exact same information that the teachers are seeing on their side. So unlike clocks, where you kind of have to do a little bit of simple math there, and I'm happy to do individual meetings to show you how to get that information as well. With L-think, we're seeing the exact same thing. And again, more time doesn't mean poorer performance. It can actually mean that that extra time is being put in wisely. So data you see in a monthly advisor report here. We're seeing our weekly progress. So we're seeing, based on a full week, how much work is being done within that time. And we're over the benchmark in the full week because our program is based off of an hour-long session. A lot of this math is done based on a 40-minute session. So we are seeing it go over the top, which is great. We're seeing 3 attempts within the benchmark would be 3 for this student, and they're getting about 10 in. So they're really exceeding expectations here, which you can see in the progress rating, where they're doing more than we would expect of them. Sometimes we would want to slow down in that situation, which is fine, but we're meeting that benchmark for the daily goal as well within your attendance coming through, and we're doing as much as we really need to be for that. So green is good, yellow working on it, red we really need to figure out and kind of plan based on the data we're seeing. And then the daily engagement, so the attempts and the masteries over the attempts, 0 is fine. Sometimes you're working through some stories over a longer period of time, and then the next day they got 2. So they're able to get the one they were struggling on, come back to the drawing table and really get some more attempts in at a high quality. Once we start to see a lot more masteries coming in, we start to slow them down even more, because the goal would be to get for most levels other than the higher levels, 5, 10, so 5 mastered stories in a row. Once you get that 5 mastered stories in a row, you'll move up to a higher level. It's like graduating from a class and moving to some more difficult concepts, because you are able to think at a level where you don't have to put all of your best thinking in, and it's becoming more automatic. And automaticity is really the end goal for a lot of this work. So the data you see in the year end and start of the year assessment. So in the initial learning profile, you would see something like this with a moderate severe, description of the area as well. The end of the year, they were at moderate severe. They've moved up to mild within that time. That's good progress. And that's kind of what we're working towards again. Average doesn't mean everything. Good progress can come in a lot of different forms. And as we move up, we should celebrate these jumps, because this student would be getting a lot more of the content that they use in their everyday life within this brain region at a much easier pace, without using so much energy in that prefrontal cortex. So moving on to nonverbal thinking, so the opposite side, and we'll dive into a lot more of this information at the end as well. So what the teachers see is this is very similar to what we just saw in LThink. The students are putting in, there's 3 different types of attempts. So there's the B, before, after, and present. So the B, A, and P. So they're just different stages. They have the same weight to them. So you could look at these attempts in a very similar way with the B, the A, and the P. So for this student, they had 5 attempts on a before, 1 attempt on an after, which means they would have mastered that before stage. So there are 6 attempts within this day, and they're at around a 6-minute and 55-second pace. The day before, they were struggling a bit. So 23 minutes per attempt. So they were taking a lot more time to really sift through, but it paid off. They were able to get the 10 on their present and start their work on the before, put some of that lag time in to know exactly what they're working on. So again, sometimes when they're bigger numbers like that, it seems like less is being done, but there can be different types of work being done within those longer attempts, which we fully encourage as a part of the process. So data we see daily. So this student whose screen capture I took is engaging in both RThink and LThink. So they would be seeing within their RThink side, the engagement would be 1 attempt per 1 mastery per week at 4 attempts. So that's what we're working towards, the stage masteries and attempts. And a stage mastery is one of those 3 stages. The goal would be to master the full process per week. All right, as we move into the detail, what we're looking at is for all events. So we're seeing every attempt being done, how long that attempt's being done. If you're logging in here and your child or yourself are on this activity, and it's really, you're seeing a lot longer time between attempts, they might be struggling within that. So sometimes it's good to just pull up that picture and say, like explain what you're seeing within this, and maybe not telling them what's going on, because that's going to kind of aid in your being the executive function in that, and we want to build towards independence, but it's just starting to get them to think in new ways. And again, we'll dive into our think at a bit more depth in a little while. And then we're seeing that same information that we were seeing on the first page, the same information the teacher is seeing, where you're getting a picture of the full day with the timestamp for the amount of time. So all of this is consistent in all of the measurements. Like I said, clocks is really the one where you have to do just some simple math, but the other activities are showing pretty much everything that the teacher is seeing now. For the monthly advisor report, again, we're showing the weekly progress graph here. In general, we are still having the priority of activities. We've got the goals here for fictional student John, and they're working towards a picture mastery per week within this. That would be the goal. And this student is right on schedule. Every week they're getting that one mastery done, and then they bumped up to 2 here, back to 0 here, and everything kind of averages out to meeting the expectations that we're expecting here. But they are close to being and exceeding. Like a couple more stories mastered, and I would say the student would be exceeding expectations. We don't want to push exceeding at a certain time if they're not ready for that. We want to take that time to really build those skills and build independence within the thinking process. Within the daily engagement, we're working towards that personal goal. We're working towards the number of attempts per day and the stage mastery. So this gives you an idea of retrospectively over the last, what am I looking at here, about 10 days, the amount of work being done recently, which can be, if I'm putting at the start of the month on a monthly advisor report, like that data could change significantly towards the end. So we don't want to give too much of a big picture within that 10 days is a really good representation. So the student is meeting expectations, and around an engagement score of 3.5, we do want to try to get a little more of a product to produce to the teacher. And we'll be working on that. Sometimes we do need to slow down. We do need to also, as we move up, get a few more attempts in as we process. So the data we see yearly in the ILP and YPR report for our think, a student might start at a severe level, and at the end of the year, we'll do an assessment, and this student would have moved up from severe to moderate. This should show a lot of social changes. Our think's one that we do see a little bit slower at first and then a big boom. So there's a lot of processing of information and starting to see more in public, and it takes time to really understand how you're understanding people, and be more aware of what other people are doing and trying to take in and build all of that. But once that train is running, there is so much progress that can be made. So many times when you're having conversations with friends where you're like, normally I would say this and interject, but I'm actually sitting, being a good listener, understanding what they're saying and giving positive feedback towards the end. So we don't necessarily need this to jump from a severe to average within a year. This one moving up to moderate would show significant improvement behaviorally and qualitatively. So auditory exercises are very similar to the data we see in predicative speech. So if you're working on lexical memory, memory for information and instruction and phrases, or predicative speech, this data looks very similar. What the teachers see would be the number of attempts a student would have made in the day, the number of masteries a student would have made in the day over the number of attempts. So this student did about 15 attempts, and that's around a 3-minute time span between attempts. Within 3 minutes, if you're working towards 12 masteries, that's pretty good. We do want to work down to a 2-listen average. So what I would be coaching this student based on this data, because we have 2 listens here, 3.2 listens per attempt. We want to be around that 2 to master. If we need that extra listen, that's great. But when students are first starting, like being up around 10 listens even, I would say isn't the worst thing. So you want this number to slowly come down. But for this student, 1.7, like we should be taking that second listen. Being at 1 listen isn't really working on the procedure the way that we need. So we would want to check in with the procedure within the student, because this data is showing that maybe we want to take a little bit more of a listen to get that average around that 2 point. So the data you see in the student portal, so the goal would be 1-to-1, and that's typical for most students. Every time you make an attempt, you want to be getting it right. What you want to be changing within that is the average number of listens that we're working towards. Okay, so we want to start out at maybe 8 listens, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All every time you're doing it, you're getting it right and you're confident. And the graph, the blue line would always be the student goal. So this student is working towards this student goal on most days, a little bit under on some days, but that's fine. That happens to everyone. So the detail that you would see within this would be for all events, you're seeing every listen made. So you are seeing a couple here with just 1 listen. If you're going to get that mastery, there's no harm in taking that second listen. So we do encourage that. But this student is really pushing towards a mastery of level 19. This is a higher level. The student's getting ready to move to a new cognitive function. The big focus would be on the mastery within this situation for this student. And then the daily average, again, just what we saw on what the teachers see, it's the same information here. So we are quite confident they're moving in the right direction. The feedback basically from the data would be take a 3rd listen if you need, at least take 2 listens, really work towards that practice between the listens. So it's not like 1 listen, 2 listen, 3 listen. Okay, now I'm going to do an attempt. Take a listen, practice, take a 2nd listen to confirm that you're saying it right. And if you are saying it right at that point, do the attempt. If you're not quite saying it right, and it's to a point where you feel like you need a 3rd listen, then take that 3rd listen. If the 2nd is confirming a mistake you made and you already know how to say it correctly or feel like you do, then we would say push for that attempt at that stage. So the monthly advisor report, again, this is the weekly progress that they're making. So over the course, so this also has September data here, not just October data, because it would work back for 10 weeks as well, and gives that total. So if you see the number changing, the levels can be changing within that as well, and there's not a representation of that within this. We are working towards some consistency. This student is exceeding expectations. They are getting more masteries per day than what the expectation is. The engagement score is around that 3.5. There's some improvements to be made. Not every day we're getting our goal. We do want to strive towards a 4, but the 4 needs to be earned, right? We want to make sure that every day we are putting in that best effort, and we're taking feedback, slowing down, picking up the pace, depending on what the data is showing. And the engagement score will give us that information. The comments would also provide more information for, in this situation, John to get to really understand how to improve his progress with action plans embedded. So the data we see here, the student may have started at a severe level, and then at the end of the year, they move from severe to a moderate. This is good progress. We're working our way towards average. When a student goes from severe to moderate here, we will be considering which other areas might be more of a need. If LTHINK is at a severe moderate, but we started with predicative because it was at a more severe, and in our conversations, the goals of the student lined up more to work on predicative speech right away, we'd be wanting to have that conversation now of should we be moving to a different activity and kind of stage them up together versus the full-time programs on site for most of our schools. And for some students that do take multiple activities with us, there is more of a triage now within the part-time than looking at a bunch of activities being done together and them all working up. So we do jump around sometimes periodically and move back to an activity. That's totally normal and fine. It kind of brings the whole student up without taking them out of their normal environments. All right, so I did want to jump into nonverbal thinking. So last month, we reviewed symbol relations, so clocks, which we do typically at the start of the year because most students who are new are coming to us working on on clocks. From there, once the brain is kind of settled down, you have a better connection between the right and the left hemispheres. That's now allowing better focus and attention towards the activities done in our right and our left brain. Within the next couple of months, we'll definitely dive into the left side as well. But in terms of right now, this is kind of timely as we do have our peers program starting to open up to registration tomorrow, which, depending on when you're watching this, on November 2nd, we are going to be sending out information for students to register. I've invited Bethany Church here to kind of discuss what that looks like. So Bethany will give you a little bit more information.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Josh. So as he said, we have been starting peers and we have been running the first session as of September. It's been with myself and Jenna Kelly. And honestly, it's been really successful so far. It has been really exciting to launch into this new program. And as Josh has mentioned, it kind of ties in nicely to our Think the Nonverbal Thinking exercise. A lot of these students are kind of practicing those social skills in theory, and then peers gives them the opportunity to kind of action it in their real lives. So for those who aren't very familiar, Peers is a social skills program developed out of UCLA, and it's meant to help neurodivergent individuals make and maintain social relationships. So it teaches ecologically valid skills. And this just means that it's teaching them the right thing to say to the right person at the right time. There are so many nuances in socializing that we really take for granted. And somebody on the spectrum or with, anxiety or something else that, challenges their thinking process socially, it can be really hard to navigate those social situations. So it's really focusing on how to socialize appropriately for the setting. And it's delivered in a really nice step-by-step cumulative model, super easy to follow and be successful with. The program itself is caregiver assisted, and all that means is that each student that's enrolled needs to have a parent or other supportive individual that can act as a coach. And this is really important to the homework component. There is homework every single week for peers, and that's to make sure that we're taking these skills that we're learning within the group and then we're applying them to our real lives, because that's where the meaningful friendships are going to happen. We really want to take it off screen and into real life. All of our participants need to be self-motivated. This is really important to the group. It can be quite vulnerable practicing social skills in a role-playing group setting. And, if somebody was to come to class feeling negative about it or maybe mocking the process, that could really compromise the group's integrity. So everybody needs to be there willingly and wanting to participate and work on these skills. And I'm happy to say that our current group is really willing and participating fully. We've been having such a great time practicing with one another. To give you a really quick example, one of the homework assignments that we've been doing is having a group call with a peer in the group once a week to practice the social skills that we've been working on. Now, the individuals really only need to talk for 5 to 10 minutes. It could be a really quick run through of the things we're working on, but we're finding that most of the students are choosing to talk to each other for an hour or longer. Like, they just really love the opportunity to connect with one another, and they're genuinely enjoying the conversations that they're having now that they know how to navigate the different social cues of it and how to read the responses they're getting from the other participants and the facial expressions. It's also been really cool to see for the few participants we have. I'm also, their instructor for some of them. So it's really neat to see how it translates to the classroom, and it's happening really rapidly. People are being a little bit more mindful about not interrupting when someone else is speaking, and also watching for the different cues they're receiving. If they tell a joke, is anybody laughing? It's something, again, we kind of know to look for different feedback we receive when telling a joke, whether it's appropriate or not based on how people respond. But these are things that we're learning right now, and it's really sinking in, and we get to see it in real time, which is just another great benefit to doing EA and peers at the same time, as we get to see it happen across the board. As Josh said, we are gearing up for the next session of peers, and we're really excited about that. It's going to be starting in February. We're hoping to do another adolescent cohort. This targets the ages of 13 through 18, but it's really not a fixed age range. It's all going to be about maturity. So if you have somebody in mind that might be a little bit younger than that or a little bit older, please feel free to reach out and start that conversation anyways, because they may fit just fine with the other people in the group. It's all about just creating a group that's going to be able to function well together socially. And if you are interested, please do feel free to reach out to myself or to Jenna or Josh, and we will be the ones kind of assessing who's going to be in our next group. So we're happy to talk through any questions you might have or provide any more information. Josh, is there anything else I can say to that?
No, that's great. We're here for questions. Like the big reason why we added this into our typically Aerosmith based program is as you're building potential and new connections within the prefrontal cortex in that right side, which we really dive into within nonverbal thinking. Now you can build and use that potential and use those connections to really understand and process more information. So you are holding on to more of it. It's not like one needs to come before the other, but students that do work in clocks and nonverbal thinking before taking peers will be at a stronger brain capacity to be able to take in and use and employ all the strategies and everything that peers is employing. So we're very excited about how our first group is doing right now and looking forward to the next one in February. Thank you. So to continue to dive into this side of the brain, so nonverbal thinking is a cognitive function, develops and maintains plans and strategies non-verbally in non-verbal situation and perceives and interprets non-verbal information. So we're looking at, I saw this online. I thought it was kind of funny and really pointed to this area. I usually don't think about what I say before I say it. I prefer to think about it after I've said it late at night for the rest of my life. What we're seeing is a really big trend towards that depressive thinking pattern of looking at things and over analyzing things and questioning why I said that or what I did. And that's kind of that end of the night type of conversation that someone might have with themselves, having regrets, looking back. Whereas that would be more of a right brain dominant person where they are really thinking and analyzing things of the past. Anxiety is on the other side. And I've spoken to this a little bit in other presentations. Anxiety, we see someone with a left brain strength where they're really processing things at a high level, overthinking, over strategizing, can't separate from that future moment. What we need is that balance. We always want to go back to that balance. You want to be able to look at things that have happened and analyze what could have changed. You want to be able to plan and progress for the future, but you want to stay in that moment, really take in all the information so you have all the data to make proper assumptions about what's going on to gather that information. But those who do have some issues in this area might kind of see this in themselves a little bit. So what does a weakness look like in this area? So a person has difficulty registering, interpreting their own emotions. The person's emotions are less refined and differentiated, and the person's capacity for being emotionally reactive or responsive is weaker. If you're not really sure how you are feeling, you can be pretty sure in most situations that it's hard to read what other people and understand what other people are thinking. And this little bit of a disconnect can be just like categories of sadness that it's hard to define, or excitement that are hard to define, right? So we do use emotion wheels sometimes to really give bigger understanding around this. But knowing own emotions is something that is typical for someone with a right brain impairment of some type or delay. Understanding facial expressions and body language. So it's hard to read other people. In this picture, you can see this professor is going on and on, or this boss is going on and on. He's not really reading the room. He's very excited, not really reading the room for how the others are taking in the information. So it can be hard to interpret what others are feeling or thinking as you're going through a process and observing in other situations. The behavior doesn't match the time and place, right? So a person doesn't always act appropriately in social situations because they don't perceive it as being a big deal. And I hear this from kids sometimes. Oh, I didn't think it was a big deal. I didn't think it was going to blow up like it did, or be such a big deal. I'll watch for it next time. I'm sorry. But in the moment, that doesn't change what happened, because they might be that person at the end of the night. Like, why did I say that? Like, this other kid doesn't like me anymore. So it's hard to switch from one situation to another. And this happens for a lot of like elementary age students from recess. You're in recess, it's outdoor voices, it's playing, it's loud, it's fast, to then coming right back and sitting down in a classroom and expected to focus with your best focus. That can be a hard process with someone with a weakness in this area. Trouble matching the actions to other cues, such as this example of someone's talking, they don't read that the other person is not interested in what they're saying. They're not reading that facial expression. They're not reading the other's cues of slowing down their speaking, or to change the topic, or to shorten up the story a little bit. So it's hard to have really strong conversation, because as soon as the other person starts to feel disconnected, that's when issues come in with conversations. So hard matching actions of others based on cues. Hard time to make and keep friends. So not off, like sometimes you'll hear like, oh, fine, making friends, we have lots of friends, but we've only been friends for a month, and the next month we'll have different friends, and the next month we'll have different friends. So it's hard to keep good friendships, and often can be hard to make that initial friendship for a variety of reasons. But this is typically one that comes up when I am digging a bit more in conversation with families. And do they have friends? Have they had friends for a long time? And sometimes it's, yes, we've had friends for a long time, but they understand our child, and we really need to work on these abilities, because you want to get into, when you're an adult, being able to find people that have a lot in common with you, to really find your tribe and feel appreciated. Some impulse control as well. So running on an idea that something needs to be done in a certain way. This can be displayed in impulse buying, or checking social media. There's a lot of different ways that impulse can come out. Unfinished tasks. I've started a bunch of things around the house, but I never finished anything, because one more thing comes up, and then one more thing comes up. It's hard to really finish those things and wrap them up, because the decision to start a task was made in a mindset of it being more important than it actually was, and you figured that out later, and now the job's not getting completed. Goal setting and life planning can be difficult, because typically a lot of goal setting and life planning are done with the left prefrontal cortex. So this can be a little bit of a blind spot or a weakness for some people, and it can be really hard to really make plans and organize things within the future. And this can lead sometimes to physical and emotional safety. So putting yourself in situations where you don't feel like you're doing anything wrong, but you're actually putting yourself in dangerous situations, such as this person who's drinking a coffee on the phone and driving at the same time. Often this is very subconscious. You don't really realize you're putting yourself in that situation, but when you look back at it, I know why I got in that car accident. I know why I got in that fender bender. And then you're dwelling on that past event over and over again, which we often see within that side. Quick to come to conclusions. So a failure to activate surveying of visual details to get the all-over picture of a situation. So not understanding everything that's happening within a situation, talking or interrupting before getting more information and not getting all the information, and then running with that to form a conclusion. So the outcomes that we're really aiming for within this area would be for students to be able to interpret their own emotions and other people's feelings based on cues and clues, understanding the overall dynamic of a situation, developing more meaningful social and personal relationships with friends, family, co-workers, classmates, teachers, act more strategically in new and challenging situations. So not being rigid about, this is what I know about the situation, it's never going to change, turning that from into more of a fluid intelligence. So changing ideas based on new information that's coming in, really evaluating things differently, and then strategically using all of that information to make and develop new plans. Developing skills such as self-advocacy or standing up for others, anticipating consequences of situations more accurately, and becoming more independent, given new ability to participate, plan, organize effectively. We see more connectivity within the more functional connectivity within the right side, adds more potential to that. You're able to see and understand things. That's where peers can really come in. Once students are working on this to give a little bit of a basis to the changes and give some substance there. So how it works is students will look at a picture for a certain period of time, really analyze all of the social cues that you're looking at. As teachers, we'll often like overview this, and this is a Norman Rockwell picture, as we use a lot of them. We also have a partnership with Getty Images now and have a variety of real life situation pictures, as some of the Norman Rockwell pictures can be difficult for someone born in 2012 to really understand all of these things that might have been happening in the 1950s. So we have adapted, and are more pictures now. But in terms of a person-to-person, interpersonal, nonverbal reading of cues, Norman Rockwell has a lot of great facial expressions within his paintings. So that's where we're seeing really 3 faces here in a situation. So students will write in a present attempt. So the start, and this was the stages we looked at within the data as well. So if we're looking at a present attempt, what is happening in this moment? How are the characters feeling and why? And we're writing that in a paragraph. You can say it if typing is difficult to the teacher, and they can write it down. We can take dot jots, take a picture, send that to the teacher as well. There's different ways to get that information across, because what we're really evaluating isn't your writing ability or the clearness in your writing, it's the ideas at which you're thinking about. So often I could see some differences coming in. Little boys with his dad, who's a police officer, and trying to decide which pie he wants from here, right? There's different ways you can come into this. You get a score out of 10 based on a hot and cold. So if it's a 10 out of 10, you would move to 10 minutes before. If it's a 10 out of 10 on the 10 minutes before, you'd move to 10 minutes after, using this picture as kind of that guide for that present moment. What we're really seeing here, if someone did tell me this is a cop's son and he's trying to choose which pie he wants, and the guy's smiling, waiting for the answer, there's other clues here, like, what is this bag? Why is it tied to a stick? Do you think this boy knows this police officer? Is it a coincidence that they're sitting beside each other, right? There's questions that we can kind of guide towards to really understand, like, oh, maybe that's his stuff and he ran away and he's talking to the police officer, and the police officer's trying to talk him into going back home, and the shopkeeper is looking at the situation and smiling because the boy's now smiling, so it seems like they're starting to resolve the situation. So once I get a 10 minutes before, and the 10 minutes before can really go in any direction as long as it lines up with what's happening in the present. So that could be, this boy wanders into the shop, the shopkeeper says, like, hey, where are your parents? And the boy says, oh, they're not here or something. And the shopkeeper calls the police officer to come in because this boy's clearly run away from home. Once we get a 10 there, we move to 10 minutes after. The cop might be taking the kid home and delivering him to his parents, and the emotions that come with that as we're following through. Once you get a 10 on the after, we change the picture, and we're aiming for 1 picture per week. Excuse me. So what can you do at home outside of this? So work on the nonverbal thinking exercise with us, or the peers program with us as well. Use lots of emotion vocabulary. So start to use that language outside of the activity and really describing how it looks like people are feeling, or how you're feeling in the moment. This really starts to build that foundation for emotion within the brain in the right side. Find social emotional experiences from your day-to-day to share about. So I felt very happy when this happened. I was very frustrated when this other thing happened. Now I'm feeling quite good that I'm home with my family. Starting to really bring up experiences and it relates to when this happens to me, maybe I feel like this, or this is the language for what I feel when this other thing happens. It can really start to help giving some intelligence around that emotional setting. Read novels about lives and experiences different than your own. We want to broaden our horizon about how other people feel. We want to build empathy. We want to be able to feel sad for other people or happy for other people, rather than just all the emotions come back. My whole attitude on life is about how I'm feeling in the moment. We want to branch away from that as best as we can. Speech language pathologists do work on social behavior, and this is really good once the rating on the assessment is coming closer to average, because a lot of this SLP and the speech language pathologist work can really depend on holding on to information, which sometimes if the brain isn't at a capacity to hold on to more information, some of that work can be lost. So you want the brain to be in a state to really understand and grow within that. Play games while watching TVs or movies. Like I've seen people turn the volume off and describe what they're doing based on the facial expressions, and not just relying on language to understand what people are explaining, how they're feeling. So asking those questions, like, why do you think they're feeling that way? What happened to lead up to that? Really analyze the emotional side of situations. Naming your emotions and matching it to facial expressions and voice tone. So modeling what that face looks like. So if you're upset at your child, for example, but you're kind of laughing because you're in public, like giving that name, like, I'm very frustrated. We need to, we need to do what I'm asking, or some type of consequence. So really naming emotions more, which isn't natural to speak in, but becomes more natural the more you're able to do it. And having compassion through the process, like understanding that this can be difficult is a big help in being patient, especially as a parent, but being patient for yourself as someone who might have trouble in this area, and understanding that I need to put extra work into understanding this process and understanding these people if I find value in that. So thank you so much for watching. This is a little bit of a longer one. We went for the full hour. So the next one will be at the start of December. And we're going to be looking into a little bit of brain injury and different dysfunctions that can appear like learning disability. So I know a lot of students come to us from that place as well, with multiple reasons for being with us. So thank you, and we will see you next month.